Welcome, everyone, this is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of, what if Deku became a painter? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Dandelions are just friendly little weeds who only want to be loved like flowers. Heather Babcock Izuku mornings always seem to be the calmest. It's hours before any villains start causing trouble in the low-income part of the city, and all that can be heard is muffled traffic and civilian chatter. It's mid-August and the summer heat is at its hottest, making most people shuffle inside for cheap air conditioning. Izuku, however, prefers leaving his windows open for the summer breeze to flow in. Growing up in the countryside without access to air conditioning made the Omega prefer the simplicity of the wind to cool his high-class apartment. It made it feel more like home. Muro. Izuku blinked sleepily as a heavy weight plopped itself on his stomach. A chubby, extremely overweight, damn near ancient, gray cat huffed at him and pressed a paw against his cheek. His amber eyes were tired and grouchy. The small Omega sighed, rubbing his eyes as his cat began to complain some more. "You can't wait a few more minutes, Frodo? It's 8 a.m. Frodo scowled. Muro. Izuku rolled his eyes and smiled affectionately at the ancient cat. As he slowly woke up, the small Omega glanced around his bedroom. Warm sunlight filtered through the large window and bathed his bed and nest in orange light. The sky was a beautiful mix of pinks and yellows, swirling across the sky like it was following the path of a paintbrush. Pretty. Mrow. Izuku winced as Frodo dug his claws into his bare thigh, an exasperated sigh escaping his lips. "Alright. Let me take a shower, then I'll get your meds. I still smell like oil paint." Frodo glared at him for a few seconds before finally moving off of Izuku's body. He made his displeasure known as he waddled out of the bedroom, his tail flicking in obvious annoyance. He's always been this overdramatic, though. The small Omega sighed, a long yawn trailing soon after as he sat up and stretched his arms. The large sleep shirt, a hand-me-down from his dad, hung off his tan, freckled limbs and resembled more of a dress on his curvy frame. "I better hurry before Frodo pukes on the couch." Izuku stood on tired legs and climbed out of his in-ground nest. His bed sat beside it, still untouched from when he had made it a week ago. The small Omega wandered towards his dresser, still muffling yawns as he opened them. His curls stuck up in odd directions, no doubt making it look like he'd been electrocuted. As he woke up some more, Izuku stared at his clothes. He didn't have a variety of colors, but he had to be careful. "I'm working on that charcoal portrait of Chargebolt and Red Riot. I should probably wear black." Izuku grabbed an old Dynamite shirt he'd received as a birthday present from Eri. He's had it since their last summer before she graduated UA. It still smelled vaguely of her honeydew scent, and it was one he always wore when playing with charcoal. He paired it with the dark green shorts since it was supposed to be a particularly hot day today. Izuku definitely wasn't leaving his stupidly high-class apartment, so it's not like he had to worry about being decent. He also paired it with his glasses, which matched all the others with Hit's green frames and rose-pink lenses. The small Omega wandered into the bathroom and undressed before stepping in the steamy shower. The hot water felt nice on his skin and the serene calm of it all was enough to make anyone relax. Izuku's always liked the quiet, anyway. He was the only child in his small family and had always been a quiet child. His mother would say it probably had something to do with Izuku being born an Omega, but his father argued otherwise. In reality, Izuku was quiet because he didn't have many people to talk with. Omegas were the bottom of the barrel in society nowadays. There were laws restricting them from working and even laws that restricted their right to choose. Society seemed to thrive off of making Omegas submissive housewives, going to the point of refusing to allow any Omega heroes. Izuku is also quirkless, so he's the lowest of the low. His small town was full of betas and very few alphas. Even his mother was a beta, so everyone was surprised when Izuku was born. As he grew, nobody besides his family acknowledged his existence. Until his dad's co-workers started spending summers with them. Shota and Hizashi were both beta heroes with an adopted little girl named Eri. She was an Omega that was the same age as Izuku, but he was still shy. Hisashi was loud sometimes and told weird jokes that no one laughed at except Izuku's mom. Shoto was the complete opposite and rarely said anything at all, except when he was telling stories about his job with Eri. It took a few weeks, but they grew on him. Izuku couldn't rely on their interactions forever, though, because they always left with his father at the end of the summer. Then he was alone again, only able to talk with his mother as she worked on their garden. Yeah, Izuku likes the quiet. After his shower, Izuku dressed and brushed his hair into a small bun. Then he walked out of his bathroom and made his way towards the stairs, his bare feet echoing throughout the two-story apartment. Frodo was waiting angrily in front of his food bowl, his face fixed in a scowl as his tail moved angrily behind him. "I've got it, Grumpy. Moreau." Izuku laughed quietly and opened the medicine cabinet he kept on the counter. It held his birth control, emergency suppressants, Frodo's arthritis medication, and Hao's own mix of antidepressants. After placing the pill bottles on the bar, Izuku spun around and opened the fridge. Frodo's wet food can from last night was ready, so he grabbed it and quickly mixed it all together. Then he placed it on a small plate before walking over and setting it by the bowl of dry food. Frodo pounced, muffled growls escaping his throat as he slurped down the foul-smelling food. Izuku's nose wrinkled immediately. "Gross. You're welcome, Mr. Grumpy Pants." The small Omega went back into the kitchen and opened the fridge again. Instead of grabbing regular food, Izuku grabbed a chilled peach Red Bull and a granola bar from the cabinet next to the fridge. It was all he had besides cup ramen. His dad was paying for all of Izuku's new necessities, but the small Omega wasn't too keen on letting him know that he might need more money. He's surviving just fine with his energy drinks and granola bars. "I should overlook auditions before I sketch." Izuku's quiet voice was barely a hum in the quiet apartment, like a weak breeze pushing against motionless water. The small Omega juggled his breakfast in one arm as he grabbed his laptop with the other, nearly dropping all of it in the process. Once he felt situated, Izuku walked towards his balcony door and stepped out onto the large balcony. It was decorated just like his mother's greenhouse at home, with soft white furniture and olive green accents. Frodo had a large cat tower to his left and a comfy chair was on his right. In front of the chair, Izuku's easel and art supplies were positioned on a frog-patterned tarp. Plants lined the beams above him, filling the air with a sweet scent and covering Izuku in a cool shade. He had to trim them sometimes if they dangled too close to the ground, but overall it did look like home. Home. This is the furthest Izuku's ever been. 6 months ago, Izuku made the decision to leave his hometown. There were people he wanted to avoid and the atmosphere was so suffocating that it made his lungs ache. Nobody was interested in his art anyway, so a change of scenery was best. At first, Izuku wanted to save up the money on his own. He'd been relying on an alpha for the past 4 years of his life, so he had no intention of leeching off of his father. Fate had other plans, considering that society wasn't too keen on an independent Omega. Izuku was stuck when nobody wanted to hire him. His dad was more than happy to help, though, and that's why Izuku was filthy rich from his days as a pro hero, and it wasn't something either of them liked to flaunt. In the end, his dad convinced him to accept a fully furnished apartment of his choosing and a monthly allowance. Now Izuku only has to focus on Frodo and his art. 2 months ago, Izuku secured a chance to open his own art gallery here in the city. The idea alone was enough to make him cry, which had always been easy, and throw himself into working at full capacity. The theme would be something close to Izuku, approaching the topic of domestic abuse and Omegan rights. He'll even have a separate section for all of his pro-hero portraits he's done through the years and has some performance pieces. A few sleepless nights weren't a big deal, all things considered. Getting comfortable on his favorite chair, Izuku opened his laptop and opened his email. There were a good 35 emails, all containing auditions from people wanting to perform in his gallery. He only had 3 performance pieces, so he had difficult decisions to make. This one? Izuku clicked on the second email. Adjusting his glasses, a video started to play. The small Omega, as stated in her email, stared brokenly at the camera for a few moments before beginning her monologue. Her voice cracked and blue eyes watered, making Izuku's skin prickle. "She's amazing." Izuku opened his energy drink and took a long sip before opening the notebook he kept near this chair. He started writing note after note, his green eyes flickering back up to the screen and squinting through his pink lenses. Asterisk 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 lunch came quicker than Izuku expected. Actually, scratch that. If Izuku hadn't set an alarm, his mother's idea, not his, to remind him to eat lunch, the small Omega would have worked through the mealtime. When he's focused, he could do his task for hours and never get tired. Izuku closed his laptop and stood, stretching his limbs like the chubby cat inside. It was much hotter than this morning, and the green-eyed Omega could hear the familiar sound of explosions mixed with frustrated curses. I shouldn't have chosen the apartment building opposite of Ground Zero Agency. The explosions are way too frequent. His eyes flickered to the fancy building across the street. Nothing I can do, now. Ground Zero Agency was owned and run by Japan's #1 pro hero, Dynamite. He shot straight to the top of the polls straight out of high school when Izuku was 8. He's loud and angry with a powerful quirk, so it was natural for him to have fans. He's one of Izuku's favorite pro heroes. Dynamite's in his early 30s now, right? I should ask Shoto. Izuku walked inside and made his way for his stash of cup ramen, his tummy growling with hunger. He grabbed the mint green chopsticks Eri had bought for him when he moved, smiling warmly at the memory. As the small Omega waited for his food to finish, he scooped a sleeping Frodo off the kitchen bar and held him close to his face. Izuku covered his head in kisses, earning an annoyed purr from the sleepy cat. I love you, little hobbit. The cat huffed, pressing a paw against Izuku's cheeks. Izuku grinned and stopped his assault, placing the cat back on the bar. We'll cuddle later, okay? A new documentary on Dad got released and I promised him we'd watch it. Frodo's face scowled. Muro, don't argue with me. Muro. Izuku chuckled fondly, scratching Frodo's chin before grabbing his finished lunch. Ignoring the temperature, the small Omega quickly ate the salty ramen with a disgruntled purr hanging in the back of his throat. Gross. After the last bite, Izuku tossed the container and grabbed another energy drink from the fridge. After damn near chugging the sweet liquid, the green-eyed Omega wiped his lips and took a much-needed breath of fresh air. Izuku walked by Frodo again, patting his head a few times, and grabbed his charcoal supplies from the dining room table. His charcoal sketch of Chargebolt and Red Riot was a piece he started yesterday while he watched them have lunch on the agency roof. He's not a stalker, okay, Izuku just likes drawing them while they're relaxed and laughing together. It gives him better access to fresh inspiration. He had originally started watching them a few months after he moved in because he was intrigued with all the loud laughter filtering into his apartment. That, and Izuku hoped he'd see Dynamite. Dynamite has always been the hardest to draw for Izuku, mostly because his eyes and hair had a specific shape he couldn't get quite right. His facial expressions were hard to properly replicate too, so he desperately wanted a chance to practice. I'd probably die, but it'd be so worth it. As Izuku carried his supplies onto the roof, he looked for the familiar group of colors on the agency roof. Red Riot and Chargebolt were sitting side by side, their faces flushed as they obviously flirted. Pinky sat across from them, her loud laughter echoing in the air. Izuku's eyes lit up. Perfect. The small Omega sat on his tarp, setting up his charcoal pad and opening it to his sketch of the two mated heroes. He grabbed the charcoal sticks, using his free hand to turn on his favorite true crime podcast. As the familiar banter echoed, Izuku focused on his task. Izuku glanced at Red Riot's hair, studying how it fell down his back. It's fluid. The excited Omega hummed and started sketching on the thick paper. Charcoal dust hit his face as the breeze swarmed the balcony, but Izuku was too focused and completely content as he drew shapes in the black charcoal. He sketched Red Riot's mask, his gaze flickering between the page and the heroes across the street. Izuku kept his movements sharp, wiping a bit of sweat from his face. His face is probably smudged. Oh well. Art has always been Izuku's escape. Not just visual, but he writes music and plays too. Creating something beautiful in the chaos of his reality made the Omega feel a little bit better about the world. He hoped that he could make it less gray and restrictive by introducing colors and freedom to others. Izuku couldn't be a traditional hero, but he could try and be his own. Asterisk 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 KATSUKI. Hop off my knot, asshole. Katsuki fired off a few explosions in the villain's face, making the female beta curse and release him from her quirk's grasp. He landed on his feet, ignoring the jolt of pain that shot up his spine and heated his shoulder. The villain hissed, holding her face in pain, "You can't hit a girl." The tired alpha growled, launching himself forward and tackling the woman who smelled way too much like his old hag. "Do I look like I give a shit?" The beta struggled as Katsuki slammed her against the asphalt, fastening quirk-inhibiting handcuffs on her wrists. She froze, staring in horror at the hero as she realized that she had been captured. Then a weak whimper escaped her throat. Katsuki scowled, getting to his feet and wiping sweat from his forehead. "I just wanted one fucking day. I'm too fucking old for this shit." After making sure that the police had the low-level villain in custody, Katsuki fastened his gauntlets again and shot off towards the agency before any media could arrive. He fucking starving and he needs to be off his feet for a few seconds. Katsuki carefully landed a little ways from the agency, his shoulders burning and his skin covered in a thick layer of sweat. It was overwhelmingly hot, even for an alpha who required his sweat to make money and save lives. He's the best of the best, so a little fucking heat shouldn't bother him. The sweaty hero trudged inside, nearly sighing in relief as chilly air conditioning chilled his skin. Instead, Katsuki ignored the chirpy murmurs of hello and bolted for the break room where he kept his lunch. "I'm so fucking, not so fast, Katsuki." Before Katsuki could get very far, a small hand slapped his bicep and sent him floating to the ceiling. His stomach churned at the change in gravity and wide his chest. Katsuki snarled from the ceiling at his Omega assistant, who looked just as angry as they glared at each other. "What the fuck do you want, round face? Release me." Ochako snarled back, her face reddening as she held up a familiar bento. "You're 32 years old, Katsuki. I can't do my job if you keep forgetting the damn bento you bitch about making every day." "Oh, fuck. What?" No response. Katsuki scowled at his former classmate, who looked utterly done with his shit. "Big fucking deal. I forgot it one." Ochako's eyes twitched. "This is the 27th time, 27. The alpha scoffed from his spot on the ceiling, growling at his employees as they walked past with amused stares. His stomach wasn't churning anymore, but he was hungry as fuck right now. "Don't fucking yell at me, round face. I'm your boss. You're a child." "What the fuck?" Katsuki shot a glare at his assistant, who could have easily been a hero had the government been more accepting. "I'm a full-grown man. Actually, I'm the numb." Ochako cut him off by immediately releasing him from her quirk, watching as Katsuki's body slammed against the expensive wood. "Don't pull that. Are you feeling okay? You're acting more demonic than usual." "The fuck?" Katsuki muffled a wince as he stood on his feet. "I'm fucking fine. I just need to eat lunch in my office and fill out paper." "You promised Mina lunch." The alpha stilled, wrinkling his nose in distaste as he vaguely remembered promising Raccoon Eyes that he'd eat lunch with them in exchange for her taking babysitting duty. "Of fucking course I did. They on the roof?" Ochako nodded, handed Katsuki the bento. "Don't destroy anything you don't want to pay for, Katsuki. Even if Denki's an idiot. I'll do what I want. Thanks, round face." Ochako rolled her eyes, waving him away. "Just tell my wife I'm here to take her home. We've got plans with my parents." Katsuki huffed in response, turning away from the middle-aged Omega and trudged towards the stairs. He hadn't eaten lunch with his extras in a long time, mostly because he's been swamped with paperwork since UA intern season started. Since Katsuki and the rest of his class had obliterated All for One and imprisoned Shigaraki, his life had become boring and repetitive. He's been working constantly for the last 15 years and has more than enough gray hairs that he has to ask Eijiro to dye them blonde. As much as he loves his job, Katsuki hates repetition. In the last 15 years, Katsuki's had to watch the rest of his classmates start families of their own and have lives outside of work. Some even have a few litters of pups and look damn happy while doing so. And even though he acts as if he hates it, Katsuki loves babysitting those kids. It almost makes him bitter, though. Katsuki is well aware of how difficult he is to manage. Ochako, due to being an Omega, couldn't legally become a hero, so she settled as an Omega assistant for him straight out of high school. As his assistant, she was allowed to use her quirk and fight battles when absolutely necessary. She's put up with his bullshit for years. However, Katsuki wants what everyone else has. He wants a mate and pups, someone to come home to after a long day at work. Someone that will listen to him cry and cheer him up anyway. Someone soft and warm, balancing out his shitty personality perfectly. As number 1, though, Katsuki doesn't get the chance to fall in love with strangers. He's been on a few dates since graduation, and 80% of them were all greedy and attention-seeking. The rest were obsessed fans hoping to sleep with him. So finding something genuine would be difficult, and Katsuki is too fucking tired to try. And I said, "Yeet yeet, good sir, to Aizawa-sensei?" "Yup, I'm badass. Babe, he yeeted you into a building." "That's beside the point, didn't I look cool? Do you want me to answer that?" "Idiots. They're my idiots, though." Katsuki stepped on the roof, wincing as pain spread through his body. Eijiro was fawning over his alpha mate in his lap, who was sporting a nasty bruise on his forehead. Mina was eagerly eating from her bento, pointing her chopsticks in their direction. Denki wailed dramatically, earning a sympathetic glance from his alpha. "I was trying to be funny, babe. Why can't sensei take a joke?" "Maybe because you're 30, dumbass." All three alphas looked at Katsuki in surprise. Mina screeched, followed quickly by the other two as she celebrated. "Our king has returned. Boys, now I have someone to suffer with." Eijiro gave Katsuki a wide grin. "Welcome back to the rooftop, bro." "Yeah, Kats. It's been ages." Katsuki rolled his eyes and sat in his usual spot next to Mina. The atmosphere felt familiar and comforting to him. A nice change, all things considered. "I'm doing my job, shitheads. It's only been a few weeks anyway." Mina gave him a look. "It's been 6 months, Kats." "Well shit. My fucking bad, I guess." Mina laughed at Katsuki's expression, all too familiar with his embarrassed scowl. "No worries. We just missed our resident grouch. Working with you isn't the same as hanging out, you know?" Katsuki huffed, opening his bento with ease as the heavy summer heat blasted his skin. It was standard and repetitive, mostly because Ochako knows better than to switch it up on him. In his early years, the alpha would have made his own lunch with more character. Now Katsuki's too busy for anything other than work. As his idiot started to converse and tease Denki some more, Katsuki focused on eating. Although it was hot, there was a slight breeze in the air that made the day seem the tiniest bit bearable. Birds chirped and vehicles could be heard below them, but something felt off. It wasn't anything major, but Katsuki couldn't figure out what it was. "It feels like I'm being watched." Katsuki glanced at his idiots. "Do they not feel it?" The alpha carefully chewed on his rice, resisting the urge to release intimidating pheromones. Carefully, Katsuki looked around at all the buildings surrounding his agency. Most of them were office buildings, except for the apartment complex across the street. Katsuki looked up some more, and that's when he saw it. Or rather, saw him. A small Omega was perched on an expensive balcony right across the street. He looked small yet sturdy, his skin holding a youthful appearance that made him look strangely angelic. Thick tanned thighs peeked out from beneath him, covered in a strange black substance. The stranger wasn't even sparing Katsuki a second glance. Instead, the small Omega was focused on the sketchpad in front of him with a determined gleam in his green eyes. Cute glasses with pink lenses rested on his nose, yet much cleaner than the rest of his freckled face. His curls were tied back with a pink scrunchie, making him look much prettier than before. Hell, all of those little things made Katsuki's inner alpha purr. What the fuck is he doing? The small Omega stilled, almost as if he felt Katsuki's eyes on his skin. After a few seconds, his pretty green eyes flickered to the alpha's red ones. Katsuki's skin immediately flushed. The stranger turned bright red, seeming much more embarrassed than Katsuki as he ducked his head behind his sketchpad. The breeze shifted slightly, hitting Katsuki with a smell he hadn't noticed before. It was fresh and clean, like folded laundry on a nice day. It held a hint of pine and the faint vanilla sweetness of Omega, accompanied by some embarrassed pheromones. Oh! Katsuki forced himself to look away from the balcony, his heart thudding unevenly in his chest. The person, perhaps an artist, was obviously an attractive Omega. But he's met a lot of attractive Omegas in his lifetime. So what was different about this one? There may be a great fire in our soul, yet no one ever comes to warm himself at it, and the passers-by see only a wisp of smoke. Vincent van Gogh Izuku, it's been 2 weeks. Dynamite started eating on the rooftop 2 weeks ago, and Izuku could barely wrap his mind around it. It made the small Omega feel flustered and embarrassed, especially considering that he's been a major fan of the Alpha for such a long time. This is the closest Izuku's ever been. Dynamite looked different when compared to photos and magazine covers. He was taller, for one, and much more built than they gave him credit for. Perfectly sculpted muscles peeked out of his hero suit, his upper body more muscular than his lower half. He also had more scars. Once the mask was removed, Izuku had a clear look at the hero's tired face. White and pink scars, both big and small, dotted his face and neck. He had frown lines and a prominent jaw with lips always set in a scowl. He smiled sometimes, but that was rare. The closer Izuku looked, the more he noticed Dynamite's famous ash blonde hair was hiding hints of gray, which could only be seen in harsh sunlight. They were more likely to be from stress than age, though. Izuku had finished his Red Riot and Chargebolt charcoal piece a week ago. He had it framed and set aside for the exhibit, but now his hands were itching for a new project. This leads us to where he's at now. "I'm fine, Ma. I promise." Inko huffed on the other line, her worry evident in the sound. "Are you sure, Izuku? My maternal instincts are going off, honey." Izuku fought the urge to scoff into the phone, carrying different colors of paint to and from his supply closet. Frodo watched him suspicious, still scowling. "I've just been preparing for my gallery, Ma. Tell her I'm fine, Dad." A bit of shuffling could be heard as Toshinori grabbed the phone. "Let your mother worry, my boy, she's just protective." The small Omega rolled his eyes at that, mentally cursing at his whipped father. "I'm just saying that she shouldn't, Dad. I know she still thinks that I need an Alpha to survive, but I'm doing just fine." Toshinori sighed sympathetically. "Have you been taking your medication and talking to your therapist? That was the agreement, my boy." Izuku hummed, stacking the paint on the kitchen island next to his paintbrushes. "I talk to Rebecca twice a month now, Dad. And I take my medication every day when I give Frodo his breakfast. I promise I'm doing okay." "Any panic episodes?" The small Omega bit his lip. "I had one a couple of days ago. It was the usual night terror that I never fully snapped out of." Toshinori didn't respond for a moment, obviously processing the information. Izuku stilled, waiting. "Dad? You sound tired, Izuku." "Oh, is it that obvious?" Izuku swallowed thickly, chewing on his bottom lip. "My insomnia gets bad sometimes, Dad. My therapist says that it's normal with my PTSD and nightmares." Toshinori hummed. "And you haven't been overworking yourself?" The small Omega glanced around his apartment, which was full of art and finished pieces waiting to be transported. A small lie wouldn't hurt anybody. "I haven't been overworking myself, Dad. I spend a good amount of time in my nest." "Promise me?" Izuku bit his cheek and tasted blood. "I promise, Dad." Toshinori sighed happily. "Good. Now tell me more about your newest piece, my boy. You did some of my former students?" Izuku wasn't always this independent. In middle school, Izuku never expected to make any friends. He kept to himself and ignored the insults from his peers throughout the day, despite his desperate urge to make friends. It was around this time that a new family moved to his small town and changed his life forever. The small Omega was hiding under his favorite tree, slowly sketching out a picture of the ladybug in front of him. Then another boy appeared, an Alpha with gold eyes and dark hair, and introduced himself as Sakoda Reiki. Izuku vaguely remembers how friendly Reiki had been to him. The young Alpha spoke quietly yet confidently, sitting next to Izuku like it wasn't social suicide. His words were gentle and kind, obviously full of amazement by the Omega's drawings. It had all been flattering and unfamiliar, yet amazing. Reiki called him beautiful. Izuku was nervous at first but quickly fell head over heels for the young Alpha. They courted throughout their school years with every intention to mate after they graduated. It was a picture-perfect love story, until it wasn't. The Alpha that Izuku loved was controlling and had jealousy issues. If Reiki saw him socializing with anyone of either gender, he always gave the Omega silent treatment until he apologized. Or if he was really mad, he'd slap his face. After graduation, things got worse. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Reiki had started stealing his artwork and selling it as his own. He was taking credit and making a profit from doing so. He was praised for being the ideal alpha, all while beating Izuku into submission behind closed doors. It wasn't until Izuku found out about it that anything changed. Izuku confronted his mate-to-be, full of a rage he didn't know he possessed. The idea of someone taking credit for something he'd spent years perfecting as a skill was infuriating. The screaming match echoed off the walls of their shitty apartment, but the Omega didn't falter. Then Reiki grabbed a vase. Looking back, Izuku is a little surprised that it took so long for the abusive alpha to use a weapon on him. It was just escalating at that point. The fight ended with Izuku's blood splattered on the walls and the neighbors calling the police. His skull was fractured in 2 places and a handful of broken ribs. His kneecaps were shattered and a broken rib had punctured his lung. Izuku doesn't remember much after that. The physical recovery took months of physical therapy and doctors. Mentally, though, Izuku still struggled with flashbacks and nightmares. It wasn't until 7 months ago that he finally convinced his parents to let him move. Now Izuku has to learn how to be on his own. It's harder than I expected. After his father ended the call, Izuku took a deep breath and gathered his supplies in his arms. It was easier to create than stress over whatever thoughts plagued his mind, so the small Omega tended to overwork himself. Izuku placed his supplies next to his canvas, which already held his base sketch from yesterday. It was later than when he usually comes out here, but Dynamite has also been spending extra time in the evening on the roof. As the Omega positioned his supplies, he could hear the faint chatter between the hero and his assistant. He couldn't make out words, but the idea was nice. The calm Omega then started his usual process of mixing paint, glancing between his task and the rooftop opposite of him. Ground Zero was out of uniform, most likely because he just clocked out. He's wearing a black V-neck. That makes Izuku's mouth water with how well it clings to his muscles, and comfortable sweats that hung loosely off of him. He's eating with his assistant and pro-hero Pinky, shooting scowls at the obvious couple. He's so fucking pretty, it makes Izuku's heart hurt. Izuku tunes out the true crime podcast in the background as he tried to gauge the exact shade of Ground Zero's hair. As he looked up from his paints again, his viridian orbs locked with ruby red ones. Ground Zero stared at him shamelessly, the corners of his mouth quirked up into an odd smile. Izuku felt his skin redden as he forced himself to look away. Just paint, Izuku. The flustered Omega focused on his work again, focusing on the podcast in an attempt to avoid meeting the alpha's heated gaze. The episode's over an American serial killer named Ted Bundy, who went around and murdered young women with the same general characteristics. He bit one of the victims, which contributed to his guilty verdict later on. Oh, this episode before, though. As the small Omega turned to grab the device, the sound of impatient knocking came from his front door. It was loud but not rushed, yet Izuku was still confused. Did he order something? No, the package would have been at the front desk. Swallowing his anxiety and struggling to rationalize with himself, Izuku placed his things down and stood on shaky legs. He glanced at the rooftop one last time before heading towards the door, pushing his brain to ignore the red orbs glued to his skin. As he stepped inside, the knocking was louder than before. I'm coming, hold on. Izuku finally made it to the door, carefully undoing the locks and cracking it just a bit. Can I help you? Familiar golden eyes stared back at him. Reiki shoved his body against the door before Izuku could react and pushed his way inside the apartment. The small Omega nearly fucking screamed, but the alpha pressed a gun to his stomach with a snarl. He's here, and he has a gun. Did you miss me, Zuku baby? I'm home. His nasal voice didn't fill Izuku with love like it used to. Izuku's scream died on his tongue as ice-cold dread settled in the very depths of his soul. Instead, the small Omega took cautious steps back as Reiki advanced towards him. What are you doing, Reiki? PP put the gun down. Reiki huffed, waving the gun as he spoke. I came back for you, baby. I'm sorry for hurting you, even if you deserved it. I was hoping we could make up and go back home. He's insane. This is my home, Reiki. The alpha froze for a second before scowling like a lunatic. A weird mix of a snarl and a laugh escaped his lips as his pheromones shifted from dangerous to downright terrifying. Then he lifted the weapon and aimed it at Izuku's forehead. Izuku could feel his tears streaming, even though they probably had been since the beginning. Reiki grinned maliciously. I see how it is. Why don't you comply and submit to me like a proper Omega, Zuku? Maybe I won't kill you after I pop a knot or two. No god, please. Somebody help me. Izuku's body moved on its own as Reiki gripped the front of his clothes and dragged him backward. Even though his mouth couldn't seem to formulate the correct response, the small Omega wanted to scream for help. It was as if Izuku was having an out-of-body experience. He watched from afar as his ex-boyfriend forced him into the familiar position they always used during sex. Hands and knees with his chest pressed against the ground, his ass in the air. Izuku's struggles and attempts to flee were futile, especially with that gun pressed against his skin. Why you don't have to do this, Rei, please. You made your decision, Omega, now, present. And just like that, Izuku could only obey. Even though Reiki's bite mark was gone and the bond was broken, Izuku's inner Omega was still hardwired to obey him. Some habits are harder to break than others, especially after so many years of the same repetition. Izuku felt silent sobs escape his lips as Reiki moved behind him. Then it all went batshit. Boom, shatter, clang. Asterisk 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 katsuki. Despite what his idiots believe, Katsuki is not pining. Katsuki's preferred word of choice is, at the most, admiring. It's obviously just a coincidence that he suddenly has a lot of free time to spend with his friends on the fucking roof, and has nothing at all, to do with the pretty artist on the balcony. Pure coincidence. That's it. Okay, so maybe Katsuki's lying. Since he first noticed that damned nerd 2 weeks ago, Katsuki has willingly spent lunch on the roof despite his thinning patience for his dumbass friends. He's not entirely sure why this is happening, but he also can't bring himself to stop. The stupidly pretty Omega always comes out during lunch and spends the rest of his evening on the balcony. He always has his green curls tied up and art supplies in hand, almost as if his entire schedule just consisted of being there. Sometimes, albeit rarely, Greenie, that's what Katsuki calls him in his head, has a fat gray cat that sits with him. This cat isn't cute at all. In fact, he's ugly as fuck. And a total asshole. How does Katsuki know this? 4 days into Katsuki's new lunch ritual, fuck you. He's not counting, Greenie had started moving paint containers onto his balcony. Despite being small and constantly swallowed up by his clothes, Greenie seemed to carry them with ease. And while most people would be put off by such a strong Omega, Katsuki's fucking delighted. After all, Ochako's one of the strongest people he knows. Greenie had been very careful and deliberate about where he put all that paint. He moved shit around multiple times in order to organize everything. He even moved a huge cat tree, by size. It took him the entirety of Katsuki's lunch break to get done. The next day, though, that cat pulled the biggest fuck you in history. Katsuki was pretending to listen to whatever bullshit Pikachu and Shitty Hair were fawning over, probably their fucking kids, while casually eyeing the balcony. Again, not because he's obsessed or pining. It was pure curiosity on his part. Greenie was sitting in his usual spot, aggressively drawing on a canvas that was nearly his size. His stupidly cute face was settled in a pout that Katsuki knew now as, "I'm focused so don't fuck with me," face. The cat, however, seemed to ignore this. In fact, the damned thing kept trying to get Greenie's attention. And that's when all hell broke loose. This cat, who must have balls of solid steel, took one glance at all the paint and decided to rearrange shit. And by rearrange shit, Katsuki means completely knock over and spill the paint everywhere. Katsuki remembers 2 colors from that day: brick red and pastel yellow. The paint spilled all over Greenie, who just fucking sat there for a few seconds before lunging after the cat. The gray furball, however, was either spooked by the sound itself or by Greenie's colorful mix of curse words and took off like a bat out of hell. When Katsuki came back that evening, the cat was nowhere in sight and Greenie was still angrily scrubbing the floor of his balcony. That was the point when the rest of Katsuki's idiot friends started to pay attention too. 2 days after that, Katsuki was then presented with even more of an opportunity to glimpse into Greenie's life. It was particularly cool that day, so the small Omega had donned the cutest fucking sweater in existence with a matching beanie that swallowed his curls. Greenie had moved all his painting supplies to one side of the balcony and started setting up a drawing easel in front of his iPad. Katsuki couldn't get a glimpse of who or what was on the screen, because he totally has boundaries, but it must have been someone he cared about. Because during the entire evening, Greenie didn't glance at Katsuki once. Instead, Greenie spoke animatedly at the screen as he sketched on the paper. Even though Katsuki had originally been annoyed by the lack of attention, the sight of the usually reserved Omega laughing and smiling did things to his heart that most definitely did not make sense. It was after that day when Katsuki finally swallowed his pride and confided in his personal squad of idiots. It started out as a rant, because how the ever-loving fuck could someone be that cute and get away with it, eventually turned into Katsuki actually admitting personal shit that he probably shouldn't have. And now he's here. In his own personal hell. Actually, Katsuki's just being overdramatic. The evenings following his shift were the only chance Katsuki has to be alone with Greenie. Lately, though, Pink Cheeks and or her dumbass wife have decided to interrupt. Every single time. Today, though, they're both being especially irritating. You should talk to him. It's kinda creepy that you just watch him from afar all the time. Don't be fucking ridiculous. I don't watch him, dumbass. Katsuki's blatant lie and pointed her chopsticks in his direction. Right. What did you call it again? Coincidence? Katsuki scowled at the Omega. It is a coincidence. Mina, the fucking traitorous wench, snickered and pulled her small wife closer to her chest. They were all dressed in casual clothes, so it kinda felt like they were in UA again. Denial doesn't look good on you, honey. Talk to him. I'm not in fucking denial. The blonde alpha swallowed thickly at the word, which tasted slightly bitter. You're both idiots. What the fuck would I even say, anyway? Maybe you could just say hi? Mina tried, earning a glare. Katsuki scoffed at her idea. Fuck that. You expect me to go over there and say, hi. I'm the fucking weirdo who's been creepily obsessed with your existence for 2 weeks. No thanks. I like my dignity. Ochako shot him a look. You have dignity? Do you even remember our first UA sports festival? They had to gag you because you tried to bite All Might? I stand by that decision. That win was bullshit. Before Ochako or her wife could comment any further, that familiar scent of vanilla and pine greeted Katsuki's senses like a welcome home. His body stilled, which was reflex at this point, and his inner alpha purred. Fuck, he smells good. And when Katsuki looked up, locking eyes with calm Viridian ones, he couldn't stop the slight smile from tugging at his lips. Greenie flushed a soft pink and looked away, focusing on his task for the day. He looked especially cute today in light pink overalls with a white t-shirt. That better not be fucking half and half on that thing, beneath. His curls were held back by a pink headband that matched his overalls. You even listening to what I'm saying, loverboy? Katsuki snapped out of his daze and shot a scowl in Ochako's direction. Both women were smirking at him, unaffected by the glare. Who the fuck are you calling loverboy? I'll kick your ass, roundface. Ochako snorted. You just zoned out for a solid 3 minutes, Kats. I did not. You so did. Katsuki felt his palms spark as his annoyance flared and embarrassment flooded his chest. Mina paled and moved away, but Ochako wasn't even fazed by the threat. Keep talking shit, Pink Cheeks. I'll take that mochi you love out of the break room. Ochako immediately scowled. You wouldn't dare. Try me, bitch. She's right. I'm an asshole, but not one with a death wish. Mina, who was now a good distance from the potential murder scene, gave them both a thumbs up like a half-assed cheerleader. I'll speak kind words at your funeral, Kats. And I'll make sure Denki doesn't cover your corpse in Sharpie. Katsuki scoffed. I ain't fucking, he stopped. As the wind changed directions, something in the air made Katsuki's inner alpha snarl. It wasn't something he could easily explain, but everything felt wrong. It was as if his very soul was in an uproar and a state of panic. Katsuki spun to look at the damn balcony, only to find it empty. He's not there. In the entire 2 weeks that Katsuki has been spending his breaks up here, Greenie never changed his schedule. Ever. According to Mina, he'd been doing the same thing for months on end. Plus, Greenie's art supplies were still set out. Greenie wouldn't do that. He always cleans up. Kats, what's wrong, hun? The blonde alpha swallowed, suddenly feeling very shaken. I don't know. Something's not right, but I don't know what the fuck it is. Ochako looked at the balcony, her eyes widening. Oh fuck. After a few seconds, Katsuki could see it too. In the apartment, at least, from the little bit they could see, a man had Greenie by the front of his shirt. His mouth was moving as the Omega struggled, but whatever he said made Greenie suddenly go limp. The wind changed direction again. This time, Katsuki was hit with that familiar pine scent. Instead of its usual sweetness, it was full of enough distress and fear to make the blonde alpha snarl. And see red. Ochako, call the police and let them know I'm about to pulverize this motherfucker. And don't fucking come after me, either. Before Ochako could argue, Katsuki took a running start and blasted towards the balcony. Without his gauntlets, these explosions put a huge strain on his shoulders. In all of his rage, though, Katsuki didn't even feel it. Katsuki barely felt the wind on his skin. His landing was a little rough, but that was the least of his concerns. Distressed pheromones laced the air, making it extremely difficult for Katsuki to focus on a rational plan. Instead, like a fucking idiot, the middle-aged hero braced his feet and aimed a close-range explosion at the bastard's head. Boom. Shatter. Clang. The glass sliding door shattered, covering everything in tiny bits of broken glass. The chilly air now ran hot, smelling heavy with nitroglycerin and distress. Katsuki's aim was fucking perfect, as always, and the foul-smelling alpha was knocked flat on his ass. The bastard is short but built with an ugly fucking face to match. That's okay, though, cause Katsuki's about to make it 10 times uglier. The alpha coughed before baring his teeth. This my territory, Dynamite. I suggest you. Shut the fuck up. Katsuki's snarled words damn near shook the floor as he stepped inside the trashed apartment. His eyes zeroed in on Greenie, who was still frozen in position despite the fact that the glass door was blown to bits around him. He didn't even flinch when Katsuki stepped closer. Shit. Katsuki's pissed off eyes looked at the alpha, who had the fucking audacity to smirk. I'm giving you 5 seconds to release him from that order. Failed to comply, then I'll have the fucking pleasure to use excessive force. He's mine. I don't have to do shit. I'm gonna blow that fucking smirk off his ugly ass face. Katsuki felt his fangs elongate and drip with venom, the crackling of his palms growing bigger by the minute. You really want to test that theory? He isn't marked, asshole. You have zero fucking evidence to back your story? Blood drained from the alpha's face. Shit, our release, Omega. Greenie's body fucking sagged as soon as the order was given. Small, choked sobs broke the silence as the Omega trembled and shook. The sight was enough to Katsuki's fangs retreat back into his skull. Katsuki knelt down, careful not to touch the distressed Omega in any way. You're safe. The police are already on their way. Frightened green eyes snapped open and zeroed in on Katsuki, damn near knocking the breath out of the alpha's lungs. Greenie is much smaller than he'd anticipated, but his face is even prettier up close. The tears, though, were gut-wrenching. Greenie's lips moved, but nothing came out. He was shaking too badly. Katsuki cocked his head. I need you to take a few breaths before trying to talk. Your body is still recovering from the order. You need to relax. The Omega quickly shook his head. NN no gr rab. Ha has a G gun. A fucking what? Before Greenie could respond, a large body knocked Katsuki backward and caught him by surprise. Guns were rare when it came to crimes, especially since the appearance of quirks. But fucking hell, Katsuki should have checked more. I'm acting like a rookie, damn it. Katsuki recovered from his initial shock and blocked the attacks easily, but that didn't really help much. The bastard obviously dropped the gun somewhere when that explosion hit him in the face, but Katsuki couldn't see it anywhere. Fuckface snarled in Katsuki's face. I'm not letting you fuck this up for me, Dynamite. Do you even know how long it took to find him again? Again? I was prepared for Shoto, damn it, not you. Katsuki snapped out of his daze at the familiar hero name, which was the last thing he fucking expected out of this bastard's mouth. A low snarl vibrated from his throat as he showed him. With a snarl and a maniacal grin, Katsuki's hands sparked. Then it's a damn good thing that I am here. Katsuki propelled himself forward and landed a right hook on Fuckface's jaw. With his left, Another close-range explosion fired from his palm. He perfected the small shit for fights like these, so he's gonna fucking use them to his advantage. Fuckface was launched backward into a wall, knocking a few framed pieces to the floor. His body was fully limp now since he was definitely knocked himself unconscious when his head collided with the fall. Fucking garbage. Katsuki relaxed his stance, wincing as his shoulders ached. Without sparing the unconscious Alpha a second glance, Katsuki quickly restrained his arms and left him in a crumpled heap. He located the gun, too. It was a little semi-automatic pistol that looked brand new and barely used. As he placed the gun on a nearby table, Katsuki looked around for Greenie. The tiny Omega was exactly where Katsuki left him, curled into a ball and completely blank-faced. His tears were still flowing, but his Viridian eyes had a glassy look in them. The sight was gut-wrenching and painful to look at. Katsuki took a shaky breath before kneeling next to him. "You with me, nerd?" Greenie blinked, his Viridian eyes still glassy as they flickered to Katsuki. His eyebrows furrowed and his bottom lip jutted out. "I thought I was seeing things. Why are you here?" "Why? Is he serious?" The blonde Alpha bit the inside of his cheek to keep himself from being loud. "We could see what happened from across the street. You're pretty consistent when it comes to your routine, so I had a hunch." Greenie swallowed thickly, wrapping his arms tighter around himself. "Right. Thank you, Dynamite. For saving me, I mean." Katsuki studied his face, searching for any emotion at all. "Don't thank me for doing my job. I hate bastard alphas like that, anyway. Using orders to control people is bullshit, so I'm glad I could kick his ass." A small smile tugged at Greenie's lips. "Me too. He's so cute when he smiles, what the fuck?" Katsuki ignored his momentary gay panic and officially sat down next to the Omega. His inner Alpha is still antsy, urging him to something to Greenie. Instead, the tired hero lets the conversation drop and silence work its magic. "Hey, Dynamite," Katsuki hummed, his vermilion eyes flickering to Greenie again. "Yeah?" Greenie still looked small and shaken up, his body still trembling from his panic. He shyly looked at Katsuki, his Viridian eyes full of insecurity. "Why you don't have to, sit with me if you don't want to. The police should be here soon. Trust me, I really fucking do. I don't mind, Greenie. Besides, it's not very heroic of me to leave you by yourself." The small Omega blinked multiple times before cocking his head to the side. He looked like a stupidly adorable puppy. "God damn it, Greenie?" Katsuki felt his face flush bright red. "I didn't mean to fucking say that." Greenie blushed too, shyly looking away from Katsuki. A stupidly cute smile rested on his lips, which definitely did not make the Alpha's heart race. Nope, not at all. His ultimate gay panic mode has definitely not been activated. God, Katsuki is such a fucking liar. What the fuck do I say now? Fuck. "Dynamite? Are you in here? It's Sukachi?" Katsuki immediately scowled at the detective's voice, mentally taking note of how Greenie's face drained of all color. "We're in here." And just like that, the entire apartment was swarmed with police and paramedics. Katsuki's light conversation with Greenie, the same fucking Omega he's been obsessed with for weeks, has now been interrupted as professionals started taking in the scene. Paramedics swarmed Greenie and officers grabbed the unconscious Alpha from the floor. Katsuki huffed and forced himself away from the situation. He muttered a colorful mix of curse words under his breath before wandering over to Detective Sukachi, who actually looked pissed off instead of his usual neutral expression. Detective Sukachi looked up at Katsuki, offering him an awkward smile. "Good evening, Dynamite. I apologize if I seem a bit off." "It's all right. I hate cases like these, too," Sukachi hummed, looking around the trash department. "Uravati and Pinky called and filled me in on the situation. We'll need your official report in the morning, so you can head home if you want." Katsuki narrowed his eyes at the odd tone in the Alpha's voice. "That's not protocol. Normally, you'd want my statement as soon as possible. If you wish to give one now, then that's fine too." "He's acting fucking weird." Katsuki crossed his arms, still gauging the detective's strange demeanor. Sukachi's eyes were on Greenie, who was being wrapped in a General Omega distress blanket and treated for the cuts on his face. "Right. I'll give one now, detective. Detective Tsukachi nodded, pulling out his damned notepad and fixing his gaze on Katsuki. Start from the beginning, then. How did you notice the initial break-in? With a suspicious huff, Katsuki recounted the situation as he knew it. It was standard procedure for heroes to give statements after villain encounters, especially if it's a crime handled by an off-duty pro. Normally, Tsukachi was the type to stick to a procedure like it was law. But he was acting weird and was clearly distracted by Greenie. Once Katsuki was finished, Tsukachi pocketed his notepad and ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. He was looking in Greenie's direction again, stinking with fury and intense concern. Do you know the victim, detective? Tsukachi stilled, looking at Katsuki again. He's my nephew. I was hoping this would never happen again, but I guessed wrong. Katsuki cocked his head to the side. Again? This isn't the first attack, Dynamite. But it'll be the last. What the fuck is going on? Detective Tsukachi sighed, turning to give Katsuki a grateful yet tired smile. Thank you for stepping in, Dynamite. I don't know what his parents would have done if he'd been put through this hell a second time. Katsuki clenched his jaw. You're being vague on purpose, aren't you? Let's just say that you're better off not knowing. But I want to. Damn it. Detective Tsukachi then turned to leave, heading in the direction of Greenie and the many paramedics. Go home, Dynamite. Your job here is done. Katsuki scowled, watching as Tsukachi moved between the crowd. Greenie immediately burst into tears as the detective hugged him, gripping the alpha's shoulders like he was terrified to let go. The sight left a bitter taste in Katsuki's mouth and more questions unanswered. And more importantly, he never got Greenie's name. Open hand or closed fist would be fine. The blood is rare and sweet as cherry wine. Hosier, cherry wine. Izuku is 4 years old when he meets All Might for the first time. Plus. Didn't you hear? Izu-chan is quirkless. Isn't he an Omega too? That's what Mama says. He must be really unlucky. And useless. Yeah. Izuku sat on the colorful carpet like every other toddler, his legs criss-cross and tiny hands resting in his lap. His fellow classmates whispered and giggled around him, obviously not bothered by the idea of him hearing their words. Since the doctor's visit 3 days ago, it's like everyone in town knew Izuku's quirklessness. Normally, Izuku would spend his daycare mornings playing with the other young Omegas in his class. Today, though, was supposed to be different. Miss Hotaru said that pro-heroes were coming to visit, so they had to be on their best behavior. And for some reason, Izuku couldn't bring himself to be excited. Quietly, Izuku stood on wobbly legs and left the circle of children. Nobody seemed to notice, not even Miss Hotaru, that the tiny boy had disappeared. As he sat at the art table, Izuku gripped a blue crayon between his fingers. I hope Mama makes cookies tonight. Maybe they'll be chocolate chip or peanut butter. Izuku allowed a tiny smile to dawn on his lips as he drew sloppy lines on blank paper. He'll have to ask Mama about it at lunch when Miss Hotaru lets him go to Mama's classroom. Lunch was hours away, though. So Izuku can only wait. That's all he's good at, anyway. Alright, puppies. Please give out visitor a warm welcome, okay? Okay, Miss Hotaru. Izuku ignored the familiar chorus of voices as he searched his crayon box for his favorite shade of yellow. It was much smaller than all the others because he uses it a lot, but Mama promised to buy new crayons soon. At the bottom, next to an untouched purple, was the tiny yellow crayon. Found it. As soon as Izuku's fingers grasped the tiny object, the room erupted in happy screeching, and the air filled with the smell of excited pups. It made the small Omega flinch and whine, but nobody seemed to hear him over the screeches. Fear not, young pups, for I am here. Izuku's head snapped up as the familiar words registered in his ears. All Might, all bright and full of everything good, chuckled loudly as all of Izuku's classmates swarmed him. For a split second, Izuku almost ran to join them. However, his shock kept him glued to his seat. Why is All Might here? Izuku smiled lightly, ignoring the bitter pangs of jealousy in his chest. His classmates looked so happy and excited, so he shouldn't ruin their fun. He's bad luck after all, so maybe it's best that he stays here. Mama can tell Izuku about it later, she's nice like that. With a sad huff, Izuku found his yellow crayon again and started coloring next to the blue. Mama loves it when he draws flowers, so he can give her this one. She'll put it on the special wall with all the others and tell him how pretty it looks. She thinks all his drawings are pretty, after all. Mama doesn't get mad when Izuku sits and colors during recess, even though Miss Hotaru doesn't like it. Izuku places his yellow crayon next to his blue one before searching for the perfect green. Green like Mama's hair. Like his hair, even though he thinks it's different from hers. Everything about Mama is pretty, though. As Izuku starts messily coloring leaves, a shadow blocks out the pretty light. Izuku stops his movements and pouts, dropping his crayon and looking up at the tall Alpha blocking his light. All Might stood next to his table, looking down at him with an odd expression on his usually happy face. "Can you move, All Might, sir? Mama likes flowers, so I gotta finish." The Alpha blinked in surprise but moved anyway. "I'm sorry, young man, I hadn't realized that I blocked your light." Izuku hummed, satisfied with the return of proper lighting as he grabbed his crayon again. "That's okay, sir. Mama says that big people don't know how big they are sometimes. Did you know that some big people can touch the ceiling?" All Might chuckled in amusement. "Well, your mother is right. Big people forget how big they are in the presence of others. My mom is always right 'cause she's smart, really smart, sir." Izuku's smiling for real now, which is common when he talks about Mama. It's always been him and Mama, so she's his best friend. They're gonna be best friends forever and ever, and she'll always love him no matter what. She doesn't care that Izuku's useless. Mama loves him. "Do you mind if I join you, pup?" Izuku hummed, kicking his feet as he pretended to think about it. Then he nodded, smiling brightly at the pro-hero. "I think the chairs are too little, so don't break them. Mama says it's rude to break stuff." All Might nodded, carefully moving a bright orange chair out of the way and sitting on the floor instead. It's weird, but Izuku doesn't say so. Mama told him that calling people weird was rude and mean, so he shouldn't. The tiny Omega looked at All Might with a small frown. "Don't you want some paper, All Might? You can use my special crayons too." The Alpha Pro-hero smiles warmly and accepts the paper. "You're very kind, pup. What's your name?" "Izuku. But my big boy name is Midoriya Izuku, sir." All Might looked at him and hummed, glancing behind Izuku. The rest of the class was fawning over the other heroes, being really loud even though it's rude. "Why aren't you playing with your friends, young Izuku?" Izuku frowned. "I don't have friends, they say I'm bad luck." "Why would they say that?" The small toddler blinked, giving All Might a confused look. "It's so obvious, right? I'm an Omega, and the doctor said I'm quirkless. Everyone knows that, silly." This time, All Might didn't say anything. "Hey, Mr. All Might?" All Might snapped out of his weird quiet spell and leaned forward a bit, drawing other shapes on his own paper. "Yes, pup." Izuku used his light blue crayon to color the sky, trying to ignore the weird feeling in his stomach and the sad feeling in his chest. "Do you think I could ever be a hero? Mama says I can be whatever I want, but I think she's lying." "Well, All Might swallowed thickly. What do you think a hero does?" The small boy pursed his lips and poked his own cheek with a crayon. "A hero helps people, right? They've got cool quirks and colorful clothes, too. Oh, and they always win, no matter what." All Might nodded, switching his crayon out for the pink one. "Heroes do help people, yes. But not all heroes wear capes, young Izuku. There are all kinds of ways to help people." "Like what, Mr. All Might?" The Alpha went quiet for a moment before answering. "Doctors help the sick, and the police enforce laws to keep everyone safe. And some people need help in different ways, so there are all kinds of ways to be a hero." Izuku nodded, still frowning. "But I'm not good at anything. I can't help anyone if I'm useless, All Might. Everyone says so." All Might's blue eyes widened. Then he looked down at the table, where Izuku's finished flower picture was laid out. With gentle hands, he picked the paper up and studied it. He was so quiet that Izuku almost thought he was mad. "I don't think you're useless at all, my boy." The small boy cocked his head to the side. "But I can't." All Might placed the drawing in front of him again, interrupting Izuku's words. "This is a fine drawing, young Izuku. Everyone has different things they're good at, and I can see you becoming a great artist." "But drawings don't help people," Izuku whispered, staring at his flowers. The hero smiled. "Of course they do. Artists are able to make something out of nothing, Izuku. They bring creativity and color to those that need it, which is just as I'd say that my drawings make her happy. Izuku lit up, grinning a sunshine smile that took up his entire face. He picked up the page, studying it with sparkling green eyes before shoving it in All Might's direction. The alpha made a noise of surprise but accepted it anyway. I hope my flowers make you happy, Mr. All Might. If I help people with these, then I want you to be the first. All Might blinked before smiling warmly. Thank you, my boy, I'm glad. The next time happens 3 days later and completely by chance. Izuku gripped Mama's soft hand with his much smaller one as they walked through the farmer's market. The air was cold and chilly, so Mama bundled him up in his favorite All Might jacket he got for Christmas. As usual, everyone else seemed to ignore them except the few times Mama stopped to buy veggies or fruit. Izuku can only watch with sparkling eyes as their basket grows heavy with colorful food, even though he doesn't like veggies. After his classmates said he looked like broccoli, Izuku decided he wouldn't eat that anymore. Mama says that it was a joke, but he's not too sure. Out of the corner of his eyes, Izuku saw a bunch of dandelions on the other side of the plaza. They looked so pretty and yellow, and Mama might like some. Mama loves yellow flowers. Izuku decides to wait for his mother to let go of his hand. He wants to surprise her, after all. As soon as Mama stops to pay for squash, Izuku clumsily took off for the other side of the crowded plaza. The flowers were right next to the doctor's clinic, so it's not like he went crazy far. Mama will be so happy. Izuku carefully plucked the bright yellow flowers, smiling softly before hushed words reached his ears. Where was that coming from? Oh, the clinic. The small pup moved closer to the clinic, standing on his tiptoes to peer through the open window. Inside, Izuku could see the scary doctor and a man he's never seen before. The alpha was tall but really skinny with dark eyes and bright yellow hair. He looks kinda scary. But maybe he's sick. Scary doctor raised the alpha's shirt, but Izuku was too far to see anything. It must have been bad, though, because the doctor winced. You shouldn't have pushed yourself too hard at that daycare, All Might. You're lucky my mother's recovery girl, you know. Izuku's eyes widened. All Might? I love seeing the kids get excited, though. It is really that bad? The scary doctor sighed, raising the old alpha's shirt again. Your other form can only be held for so long, All Might. It's exacerbating the scary yellow man started to cough really hard, which was quickly followed by the sound of throwing up. Izuku wrinkled his nose in disgust until he saw whatever the weird alpha threw up. It was dark red, so it didn't take a genius to figure out. Blood. Izuku frowned and forced himself to look away from the sight, his sad eyes landing on a bag placed by the door. A familiar page was peeking out, covered in crayon marks that Izuku knew exceptionally well. The small pup squeaked in surprise, this time earning the attention of both adults. That's really All Might. Izuku locked eyes with All Might, who looked surprised, and immediately bolted back towards the farmer's market. He tripped a few times, but there was no way he's gonna be caught by Scary Doctor and All Might. Then Izuku ran head first into a warm body. Izuku, where have you been? Mama sounded frantic and smelled scared as she held Izuku. The small pup felt guilt churn in his stomach, especially since he always hated making his mother upset. She worked so hard for Izuku, and now he's made her cry. Izuku gripped her jacket with trembling fingers. There were dandelions, Mama, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you scared. His mother just hugged him tight, her scent smelling less scared than it had earlier. Izuku relaxed into her hold, purring softly as Mama picked him up. She usually doesn't carry him like this, so she must have been really scared. Mama kissed his forehead, her own face wet with tears. You can't run off like that, Izuku. What if you'd gotten hurt? I'm sorry, Mama. Izuku purred softly, rubbing himself against her scent gland. I won't do it again, at least, for today. Izuku took a deep breath, peeking out of his mother's hair. To his surprise, the small pup saw Skinny All Might being followed by Scary Doctor. They were both heading towards him, but they didn't look mad. What's that word Mama uses? Worried. Izuku waved awkwardly at the pair as guilt flipped in his tummy. The doctor didn't return the wave, but All Might smiled softly and waved back. Mama hummed as Izuku waved, turning to face that direction. Her scent soured the tiniest bit as she stared at the doctor, but she didn't react to skinny All Might. As the two alphas stopped in front of them, All Might's expression shifted. Scary Doctor, however, still looked stressed. "You need to keep that thing on a leash, Miss Midoriya," he. "Did you just call my son a thing?" Mama snarled, making Izuku whine. The doctor scoffed. "You and I both know that Omegas aren't anything more than pretty possessions. Without a quirk, that thing is the equivalent." Before he could finish his sentence, All Might placed a hand on his shoulder. Izuku cocked his head to the side as the scary doctor fell silent. All Might's smile was weird, too. He looked and smelled kinda angry, but Izuku couldn't figure out why. Is he mad that I spied on him? Or did the doctor do something wrong? "I suggest you leave, doctor. I'd hate to use my quirk again." The doctor nodded quickly, smelling heavy with fear as he left. Izuku watched him go, still incredibly confused by the interaction. Mama relaxed after a few moments before facing All Might. "Thank you. I'm sorry if Izuku bothered you at all, sir. He tends to wander off a lot." All Might smiled, his angry smell fading. "It's not an issue, Miss Midoriya. But I'm afraid your son might have overheard something he shouldn't have. I'd like to discuss this in private, if you wouldn't mind." Izuku winced as his mother stiffened. "Actually, I do mind. I'm not." Before she could speak anything else, Izuku slapped his tiny palms over Mama's lips. He then leaned close and whispered loudly. "He's All Might, Mama. He's got a bad boo-boo and now his quirk doesn't work good anymore." All Might choked, a bit of blood spouting from his lips. "See, Mama, he's hurt." Mama's eyes widened as she placed Izuku on the ground. She mumbled a mix of apologies as she pulled tissues from her bag and handed them to All Might. The air felt different, somehow, but Izuku didn't think about it too much. His mama smells a little happier now. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Izuku shakily unlocked his door, feeling exhausted and nauseous despite the fact he had just come from the hospital. His muscles ached and his eyesight was fuzzy, but the idea of leaving a mess with Frodo around was enough to keep him upright. His apartment was still covered in bits of shattered glass and broken furniture, almost as if it was mimicking Izuku's fractured state of mind. But that's not what ruined him. From what he could tell, 5 different art pieces had been destroyed during the fight. They had all been finished and prepped for transport, but months of Izuku's hard work has gone down the drain. He's more devastated than angry, though. Izuku carefully stepped over the shattered glass as tears started to stream down his cheeks. A sculpture was in pieces near the kitchen, despite the 3 months of work he spent on it. It was a feminine torso he fashioned out of smooth clay and wire. The detailing alone took ages. It was in so many pieces that Izuku could barely see the red handprints. They had been strategically placed on the waist and hips, meant to be a physical representation of body objectification. Another piece was Izuku's favorite self-portrait. He had painted the hospital, and it was one of his best pieces. It was mainly black and white, aside from Izuku himself. His entire profile was in different shades of red. Red. Everything seemed to be red. With trembling fingers, Izuku gathered the remnants of both pieces and places them on his couch. Then he forced himself to grab the rest. His abstract piece on emotional abuse? Gone. Uncle Shota's charcoal portrait? Shredded. But the one that hurt the most, out of all these things, was the one he finished when he was 15. It was his personal rendition of the fight that forced his father into retirement. Izuku had spent ages watching recordings and badgering Shoto for details. Izuku carefully gathered up every remnant of his broken artworks while holding back loud sobs. Once they were all on his couch, the small Omega wordlessly grabbed a blanket and curled up next to them. As he fell asleep, Frodo groomed his messy curls. Asterisk 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 KATSUKI. Well, hello, Mr. Knight in shining armor. Fuck off, Pikachu. It's too damn early. Oh, do you prefer Loverboy? I'll kill you. Now fuck off. You know, I didn't believe Mina when she said you. Keep talking shit and I'll dock your pay, Pikachu. Katsuki shoved past the blonde alpha and made a beeline for the locker room. Since he spent most of his night trying to figure out what the hell happened with Tsukachi last night, the normally well-rested alpha was heavily sleep-deprived. On his way to the locker room, with Kaminari hot on his heels, Katsuki was interrupted by an exhausted Ochako. The small yet muscular Omega looked like she hadn't slept at all last night, which was evident considering that she was still in her clothes from yesterday. Ochako held up a file, grinning tiredly. "I've got that criminal file for ya, Cats. I had to pull strings, but I printed it this morning." "Did you not go to sleep?" The Omega pursed her lips and shrugged. "Considering what this asshole has done, I'm perfectly okay with missing sleep. I've never wanted to punch someone as much as I do right now." Denki leaned against Ochako and poked her cheek. "Is it that bad?" Ochako blinked sadly. "Yes." Katsuki sighed and took the file from his tired assistant and flipped it open. Sure enough, Fuckface's 3 mug shots were plastered on the first few pages. The file itself wasn't very big, but that's not what he's worried about. "Why the fuck are all the names marked out?" Ochako's frown deepened. "Victim confidentiality. Aizawa-sensei retrieved it for me, but he said the victim is under government identity protection." Katsuki clenched his jaw. "Are the crime scene photos still in here?" "Of course. It's him, Cats. But it's brutal. That's all I need to hear." Katsuki shut the file and tucked it under his arm. Instead of heading into the locker room, the blonde alpha spun on his heel and walked briskly into his office. Denki moved to follow, but Ochako placed a hand on his chest to stop him. On some level, Katsuki doesn't want to read this file. After the events of last night, Katsuki realized just how precious Greenie is in person. For weeks, the Omega had unknowingly become a permanent thought in the Alpha's brain. Now that they've met, now that Katsuki's seen his smile, everything seems real. This file holds information on Sakoda Reiki, the bastard Katsuki had to detain last night. It contains photos, confessions, victims' testimony, and so much more. But it's all about everything Sakoda's done to Greenie. Katsuki shuts the door to his office and locks it, trying to control his pheromones as fury threatened to trigger a reaction. The blonde doesn't even understand why he cares so much, especially since he's only traded a few sentences with the Omega. Something about Greenie drove his inner alpha mad. Not just with curiosity, but with that primal need to claim and protect. The claiming part, especially. As he sits down, Katsuki carefully opened the file. Fuck. Unfortunately, nobody censored Greenie's face from photos of his injuries. Katsuki felt nausea churn in his stomach as he looked away, but his inner alpha urged him to continue staring. He needed answers for some odd fucking reason. Greenie's blank green eyes stared back at him, but half of his face was black and blue. The sight made Katsuki's chest hurt. Everything about the Omega screamed empty. Aside from his bruises, his skin lacked the healthy glow and color Katsuki's seen in the last few weeks. He looked thin and sickly, unlike the curves he sported now. Katsuki just wanted to hold the Omega to his chest and never let go. "I should have killed the bastard. If I hadn't shown up, there's no telling what would have happened." Katsuki's vermilion eyes scanned word after word, taking in the insane amount of injuries on the list that seemed to go on forever. Fractured skull, shattered knees, a punctured lung, broken ribs, infected bite marks, a bruised windpipe, and shattered fingers. Pictures of different weapons, which mostly consisted of household objects. The more Katsuki read, the more he understood why Greenie seemed so reserved. The small Omega had been through more than he'd ever expected, but somehow the idea wasn't daunting. It's the experiences that make a person, so Katsuki is even more set on learning more. But not from some shitty criminal file. Katsuki wants to learn straight from the source. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. "Are you okay, Cats?" Katsuki snapped out of his daze as Eijiru's voice echoed across the locker room. The red-haired alpha was fully dressed, while the blonde was barely even trying. "I'm fucking dandy, shitty hair. My alpha won't fucking relax, so I feel like I want to hit something." Eijiru's face softened. "Is this about what happened yesterday? Don't ask stupid questions." The sturdy alpha chuckled at Katsuki's response, but that didn't exactly lift the blonde's spirits. If anything, it made him even more annoyed. "I figured. Why don't you try talking to him today?" Katsuki stilled. "I doubt that he's home. His entire apartment got fucked up during the fight, so I'm sure Tsukachi put him in a hotel somewhere. I don't know, man. I've never seen him leave his apartment." "And that?" That made Katsuki's stomach drop. He wouldn't do that. Actually, how the hell would I know? He might be a stubborn idiot. The blonde alpha paused for exactly 3.5 seconds before he shoved the rest of his suit on in a flash. Eiichiro watched in surprise, not even commenting on the colorful string of curse words leaving the mouth of his best friend. Katsuki grit his teeth, tightening the straps on his boots. I hope he's not that fucking dumb. Eiichiro blinked as his best friend stood and fucking bolted out the door. With a small sigh, the redhead followed suit. Cats? Where are you going? Ain't it fucking obvious? Stop following me, shitty hair. Why are you heading for Wade? Are you going to see him? I need to make sure he's not a complete dumbass. Why can't you just knock on his door? His balcony is much closer, shitty hair. Katsuki damn near kicked the door to the roof down, but he had enough common sense and self-restraint to do the opposite. Eiichiro followed close behind, looking slightly concerned for his explosive best friend. The chilly September air nipped at Katsuki's skin, but his adrenaline was too pumped to care. Sunlight was barely peeking through the clouds, so the alpha had a clear view of the balcony. Empty. The balcony looked just as Katsuki had left it last night. Shattered glass pieces covered it, and the wind has scattered Greenie's art supplies. The only change, though, was that ugly ass cat that was staring at Katsuki from its spot on the edge. That cat looks mean, bro. Maybe you shouldn't. Boom. Now that he's got his damn gauntlets, Katsuki didn't even need much of a running start to blast himself. Ending was smooth and controlled, so that damned cat didn't even react when the alpha skid to a halt next to it. The faint trace of the distressed pheromones from last night still lingered. Muro. Katsuki glanced down at his feet, where the fat cat had jumped down and was now rubbing its head against his boots. It still looked ugly as all hell, but the purring was cute. Oi. Stop that shit. The cat ignored him, simply draping itself over Katsuki's foot. With an annoyed huff, Katsuki decided to allow the ugly cat to continue its business as he looked around the balcony. Delicate vines hung from wooden flower beds above his head, but a few of the leaves were scorched and wilting from last night's explosions. He placed his gauntlets on the ground, stretching his fingers as he searched around some more. A comfortable chair was nestled in the corner directly behind Greenie's usual perch. It smelled heavily of pine and warm vanilla, so Katsuki could tell how often the Omega sat here. Art supplies were scattered across the stone floor of the balcony, accompanied by multiple pieces of paper and a dried paint plate. The papers, though, were full of pencil sketches. What the fuck? Katsuki bent down and picked up some of the fallen sketches with gentle hands. All of them, every single one, was different angles of his face. It was like looking in the mirror, except Greenie seemed to capture Katsuki's softer expressions. A faint blush dusted over Katsuki's face. After staring at the sketches for a little bit longer, Katsuki blinked and started gathering up all the fallen supplies. The cat followed close behind, releasing a few tentative purrs in an attempt to gain the alpha's attention. Then Katsuki placed it all on the chair before eyeing the shattered glass door. The faint, fresh smell of pine and vanilla drifted from inside the apartment. Katsuki scowled slightly and rubbed his temple. Judging from how fresh the scent is, Greenie did come home either last night or this morning. That stupid, dumb, adorable idiot. Katsuki carefully walked inside, making sure his footsteps were loud and clear. If Greenie is here, then the last thing the alpha wants is to scare him. However, Katsuki's attempts were useless. Curled on the couch a little ways from the balcony door, wrapped up in the fluffiest blanket he's ever seen, is Greenie. The Omega was fast asleep, still wearing the clothes from the day before. Fuck, he's stupidly pretty. For an idiot. Katsuki stepped closer, despite the fact that his rational brain is screaming at him to leave. The closer he got, the more he noticed just how distressed Greenie was. Greenie's face was puffy from crying and dried tear tracks stained his freckled cheeks. Messy green curls stuck to his forehead in odd directions, making him look even fluffier than usual. His glasses were off-center, probably due to him falling asleep. On the couch with him, almost surrounding him, were different bits of junk. The more he looked, though, Katsuki realized it was junk at all. Different pieces of art were piled onto the couch, obviously torn and broken. Some of them looked vaguely familiar to Katsuki. especially since he specifically remembers crashing into that sculpture when Sakota tackled him. Fuck, I should leave. I definitely should not fucking be in here. Katsuki took a step backward and turned to leave, but a splash of color caught his eye. Amidst the broken glass and trashed furniture, an extreme amount of finished paintings and sculptures were taking up every empty space. Even though Katsuki is very aware that he should leave, his fucking legs changed course as he looked at all the art. Every single piece was beautifully crafted, almost as if every detail had a specific purpose. Beautiful. That's all Katsuki could come up with. One canvas was of a familiar face, especially since Katsuki spent years of his life with the old bastard. Aizawa-sensei stood next to present Mike, but neither of them wore their hero costumes. They were wearing casual clothes and surrounded by cats. Aizawa was smiling, but not that creepy-ass grin Katsuki always saw. It was small and shy, barely taking up a fraction of his face. How the fuck does Greenie know that smile? The more he looked, the more Katsuki saw. Multiple pieces of varying sizes held vague sketches of all kinds of different pro-heroes. Some were in full color, looking like a snapshot from a magazine. Red Riot and Chargebolt. Gang Orca. Shoto and Creata. Katsuki narrowed his eyes at Shoto's paintings, recognizing the inclusion of the smug bastard's children and mate, all of whom were never seen by the public. What the fuck are you doing in here? The blonde hero fucking panicked and spun on his heel to face the couch, where Greenie had been sleeping. Sure enough, the green-eyed Omega was wide awake. And honestly, Katsuki can't blame him for screaming. Greenie had his ugly cat in his arms, pointed at Katsuki like a weapon. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? I swear to God, I will unleash Frodo on your ass. Frodo? Who the fuck is, your cat's name is Frodo? Like from Lord of? Greenie scowled and continued to point the cat at Katsuki. Don't change the subject. You can't just walk into my apartment while I'm sleeping. Katsuki eyed Frodo, who didn't even look annoyed by Greenie holding him like a weapon. With a small huff, the blonde alpha finally met Viridian eyes. I'm aware that this looks bad, but can you please put down that ugly-ass cat? The small Omega scowled. Frodo isn't ugly, and why should I? I can't fucking take you seriously when you're holding him like that. It's stupidly cute, you idiot. Greenie narrowed his eyes before carefully placing Frodo on the ground. He still looked pissed, but now Katsuki could take him seriously. I hope you have a good reason to be in my apartment, Dynamite. What do you want? Katsuki felt his inner alpha huff at the use of his hero name, but he ignored the feeling. I wanted to make sure you were. Okay, I guess. I didn't think you'd be fucking home. Do you realize how weird that sounds? Trust me, I'm well fucking aware. The blonde alpha felt an embarrassed blush flood his face as Greenie glared up at him. As I said before, I just wanted to check on you. Why the fuck are you here instead of a hotel, or some shit? Greenie's eye twitched. That's none of your concern. I'm perfectly fine. It doesn't fucking look like it. The small Omega stilled, studying Katsuki's face. At that moment, Katsuki is absolutely positive that Greenie has the overwhelming power to kill him. All he can focus on are those big doe eyes staring him down, full of interest and the tiniest bit of wariness. That glassy look from last night was gone. Fuck. At this point, Katsuki would do absolutely anything if Greenie asked him to. Rob a bank? No fucking problem. Kill somebody? He'd have questions, but he'd eventually do it. Become a stay-at-home husband? Bitch, he would not give a single fuck. Greenie's face finally softened after a few seconds and a slight smile tugged at his lips. You're going pretty far for somebody you've just met, Dynamite. Katsuki's heart thudded in his ears. I don't think we're strangers, nerd. Oh really? What's my name, then? Aw, fuck. Greenie grinned as Katsuki scowled. The small Omega released a soft chuckle and started gathering up some of the broken art on the couch. Take your time, Dynamite. Maybe if you figure it out, I'll forgive you for breaking in. The blonde alpha huffed, crossing his arms as he looked around the apartment. His eyes found the closest painting and searched each corner for any sign of a signature. Sure enough, messy words were scribbled in the corner. Is Deku actually your name, or am I reading that shit wrong? Greenie froze, his green eyes going wide. Then the small Omega burst into loud giggles. earning a disgruntled huff from the ugly cat. D was so bright and pretty. Katsuki decided that he's perfectly okay with Greenie making fun of him. Especially if he gets to hear that laugh again. Katsuki's skin flushed with embarrassment before mumbling under his breath. Gods, you're so fucking cute. What the fuck? Thankfully, Greenie didn't seem to hear him as his giggles faded. The small Omega shot Katsuki a sunshine smile. His green eyes much brighter than before. You're close. My name is Izuku. Midoriya Izuku. Fucking finally, Katsuki blurted, earning a weird look. I didn't fucking mean to say that. Izuku cocked his head to the side, looking like a goddamn puppy. Are you? The sound of loud ringing interrupted the Omega, making Katsuki glare at the object on the couch. Izuku's phone screen was lit up, and the Alpha was too busy pouting to notice the dorky All Might phone case. Shit, Izuku cursed, picking up the phone. He's so cute, fucking fuck. How in the hell can someone be cute while cursing? Izuku answered the phone, plastered a fake smile on his lips. Hey, Ma, calm down, I'm fine. You know I can't understand you when you cry like that. Katsuki raised an eyebrow, earning a sheepish smile from the small Omega. His freckled skin was soft pink color, almost as if he was embarrassed by the interruption. But all the Alpha could really focus on was how Izuku's blush matched his glasses. No, I don't need you or Dad down here, Ma, I'm fine. Even Katsuki could hear that lie. Before Katsuki could voice his own concern, a familiar beeping sound echoed from his right hip. The pager was a requirement for all heroes at his agency, especially since he's currently ranked number 1. This pager means that something huge was going on. Katsuki scoffed, pressing the button to silence the annoying sound. He looked at Izuku, who was eyeing the object with a mix of curiosity and concern as he listened to his mother's voice. I have to go. Are you? The pager started to go off again. Izuku chuckled softly before placing his hand over the receiver. You should probably get that. Dynamite. I'd hate to bother you any more than I already have. Katsuki swallowed thickly. Right. And with that, Katsuki forced himself to leave the sweet-smelling apartment and grabbed his gauntlets from the balcony. As he blasted himself off that ledge, the Alpha could feel soft green eyes on his skin. For some reason, Katsuki feels like he should have said something. The words were on his tongue, ready to be spoken, yet he didn't. He panicked. Gods above, Katsuki feels like such a fucking coward. You were just a boy on a bed in a room. Like a kaleidoscope is a tube full of bits of broken glass. But the way I saw you was pieces refracting the light, shifting into an infinite universe of flowers and rainbows and insects and planets. Magical dividing cells. Pictures no one else knew. Francesca Leah Block ************************************************************************************* give or take a few days, give or take a few days. His broken apartment had finished repairs weeks ago, so it no longer resembled Izuku's fractured mind. It looked the same as it used to, but somehow it was completely different than before. Now, Izuku can faintly smell Dynamite's sweet nitroglycerin scent. He smells better than words could ever describe. Amidst the standard caramel scent that came from his quirk, the older Alpha smelled like smoke and a roaring campfire. He reminded Izuku of late summer nights spent camping with Eri, or even with his dad. It reminded him of home, and all the good things he left behind. As September turned into October, Izuku could only stand by as that scent faded from his home. Instead of crying about it, the small Omega focused on making up for all the lost pieces from a month ago. His exhibit was still happening, so he couldn't waste his energy on pining after someone who… Never mind. Is he still staring, Frodo? Moro. Roro. Shut up. He called you ugly, you know. Izuku ran his paintbrush along an expensive canvas, carefully making sure he captured the true essence of this sunset. He'd been out here since noon, wrapped up in his spookiest sweater and beanie. Sticking to his routine was important. That's what his therapist says, anyway. Frodo nudged Izuku's knee with his head, soft purrs emitting from his throat. Fine. Why can't you just let me be lonely in peace? Izuku dipped his paintbrush in his current shade of burning red. His portrait of Dynamite was far from finished, so he just focused on capturing the sunset he always saw behind the hero these days. Before he looked at his canvas again, Izuku's eyes flickered to that familiar rooftop. Dynamite, and his group of friends, co-workers, were interacting loudly on the rooftop. It was later than normal, but it looked like they were celebrating something. Everyone was dressed in casual clothes and had drinks in hand. And yet, Dynamite's eyes were on Izuku. The alpha stood off to the side, almost like an outsider, with his usual group friends sitting a distance away from him. The navy blue button-up, which he left halfway undone, like a stupidly attractive tulle, stretched tight across his front with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. A watch glittered on his scarred wrist matched the thin chain and charm around his neck. This, paired with expensive black slacks, nearly made Izuku's heart thud out of his chest. Dynamite's vermilion, although resembled rubies in this light, eyes were glued to Izuku, even as he sipped from his glass of alcohol. They looked dark and alluring, all while maintaining that hungry look Izuku had grown so accustomed to. I wish he wouldn't look at me like that. The look made Izuku's inner Omega croon like a lovesick pup, which wasn't fair. Dynamite is a pro-hero 10 years his senior. He's a strong alpha, someone who's meant for a person just as amazing as himself. Someone older, prettier, someone much less scarred. Izuku felt his skin flush under the alpha's gaze. Then, ever so slightly, the small Omega offered a friendly smile. He hopes it looks real enough. Dynamite returned the smile, taking another sip of his drink. The Omega flushed, even more than before, his heart feeling like it was about to burst from his chest. The attention made him feel warm and slightly breathless. Ignoring the nervousness in his belly, Izuku waved shyly. Dynamite blinks in surprise, but Izuku doesn't have a chance to see him respond. Hell, the small Omega doesn't even notice the alpha say something to his friends before placing his drink down. Maru. The small Omega looked at Frodo, who was now watching him with smug amber eyes. Izuku scowled, using the butt of his paintbrush to poke the cat's nose. Don't look at me like that. It was a friendly wave, Frodo, nothing more. God, I wish it was more. Since the events that led Dynamite to save him, Izuku has become much more aware of certain things. He'd known that the hero stared at him before, but now it's like a pull in his chest. Now, those ruby-red eyes seemed to draw his attention like metal to a magnet. They had been playing this game for weeks now. Izuku took a shaky breath, ignoring the flush in his cheeks and the vermilion eyes on his skin. Instead, he ran his paintbrush along the canvas again. Processing his emotions in a healthy manner is not something Izuku is particularly good at. Ignorance is bliss, after all, so he's much better at ignoring problems. His therapist, a bright-eyed American that knew his father, keeps telling him it's not healthy. None of Izuku's problems are healthy. PTSD is his biggest one right now. Post-traumatic stress disorder is the product of whatever hellscape Izuku's childhood and early adulthood had been. Being treated like an outcast for your entire life can do that. And Reki had only made things worse. Izuku only leaves his apartment if absolutely necessary. Crowds make him panic, loud noises freak him out, and human interaction in general just left him exhausted. If anybody wants to hang out, then they have to come here. And by anybody, Izuku means Eri, Kutra, Shoto, and his mate plus pups, and his uncles. However, they all have lives outside of Izuku. Eri officially became UA's nurse 3 years ago after Recovery Girl's death. Omegas couldn't be heroes, after all, so she does the best she can as a healer. Thankfully, Eri could keep up with all those heroes in training since she interned under Dynamite himself. Then there's Kutra, who hasn't been exactly easy to talk to since Izuku rejected him months ago. He's an alpha pro hero now, so his schedule was even busier than Eri's. Shoto already has his hands full as number 2, but he also has a maid and full house of pups to think about. Izuku still sees him on holiday with his parents, but it doesn't compare to spending the entirety of summer break with him. When Izuku was 4 years old, he learned the truth about All Might. One for All had been a hard concept to grasp at the time, but he's had most of his life to understand. At first, OFA had originally been gifted to Izuku with the hope that his body would slowly adjust and grow with the quirk. However, Izuku's body couldn't handle it. After having the quirk for less than a year, the small Omega decided that it wasn't worth breaking his body for. Omegas can't be heroes, so OFA needed an alpha successor. That's when Dad started bringing Todoroki Shoto over during summer break. The young alpha had been awkward and a bit dense in the beginning, but Izuku always thought he was funny, The young Omega would often watch them train and take notes, always offering his new ideas for training. He didn't know it at the time, but his ideas really helped OFA thrive with Todoroki. Halfway through that first summer, Izuku met Endeavor for the first time. He can't remember details, but Endeavor had shown up one morning and demanded that Shoto come home. Instead of listening, the house erupted into chaos as loud arguments bounced off the walls. Izuku remembers hiding in the bathroom with his mom, who wasn't scared but did her best to soothe his anxiety. After that day, Shoto became a new member of their household. He stayed with them on holiday breaks, sometimes visited Izuku on weekends, when he didn't see his mother, and even took family photos with them. Shoto is Izuku's older brother, even though nobody knew about it. Izuku's best memories were of begging Shoto to do cool things with his quirk or test new training moves. As he grew older and learned more about his past, it only increased Izuku's admiration for Hai. After what happened with Reki, Shoto was the only person who truly understood what Izuku was going through. Trauma sucks ass, but it made them closer. I think I'm done for the night. Maybe, ding, Izuku's body immediately recoiled at the sound of his doorbell. Brief glimpses of memory flashed through his brain, no doubt because of what happened last time an unexpected person knocked on his door. The small Omega swallowed thickly before placing his down. Frodo rubbed against his arm, looking expectantly at him. I don't remember inviting anyone over. For a few seconds, Izuku has to rationalize with himself. Reiki is in jail until the trial, which he wasn't needed for since Dynamite's witness testimony would suffice. Plus, the resulting increase in security means that whoever was at his door had permission. And wouldn't hurt him. Izuku takes a small breath and stands on trembling legs. As he turns to walk inside, the small Omega locked eyes with intense red ones. Dynamite was still watching him, but his eyes were narrowed slightly. He must be experiencing déjà vu as well. The small Omega ignored the heated stare and continued inside, where his doorbell was still ringing. Frodo followed close behind, grunting a few times as he kept up with Izuku's feet. Izuku carefully opened the door, wholly underprepared for who was on the other side. Surprise, to Izuku's delight and slight chagrin, both of his parents stood on the other side. His mother wore her usual casual wear, which was always odd to see since she always wore overalls nowadays. Toshinori wore his usual attire, but this time supported his weight on a cane Izuku's never seen before. His health is slowly declining, so it made a little sense. Inko burst into tears immediately before hugging Izuku tightly. "Ma?" Izuku returned the hug immediately, breathing his mother's rainwater scent. Inko held him tightly, despite her short stature. "Oh, my baby, you nearly gave me a heart attack when you didn't answer the door." Izuku laughed awkwardly. "I wasn't expecting you, honestly." His mother huffed, still hugging him tightly. "Were you on that balcony again?" "Honestly, honey, I can't." "Inko, dear? Perhaps you should let him go so we can head inside." Izuku shot his father a grateful glance as Inko detached herself from him. Toshinori chuckled, moving for a hug as well. "I'll get some tea started. I should have a little leftover from Shoto's visit last week." Toshinori smiled warmly as Izuku led them inside. "Good, we much to catch up on, my boy. How is little Frodo?" "Fat, grumpy, and still an asshole. He's still his usual self, then. ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** Katsuki hummed, nodding at Eijiro's words as he stared at the empty balcony. It's been an entire month since Izuku's assault, and he's still pining like a total fucking idiot. All interactions with the Omega have been stares and awkward smiles. It's a strange dance, but Katsuki fucking hates dancing. A large part of him wants to launch himself onto the balcony and talk to the Omega himself. Katsuki wants to check on his well-being or maybe even make him laugh. The other parts, the more rational ones, know better than to do something that impulsive. Deep down, Katsuki knows that Izuku is probably much younger than him and likely isn't interested. That notion alone is bitter in his mind. You must really like him since you haven't yelled at Denki once. Katsuki snapped out of his daze and shot a half-hearted glare at his best friend. Eijiro simply grinned, completely unaffected by the glare. Do you want me to scream on your mate, shitty hair? I'll happily oblige. Eijiro chuckled, finishing off the last bit of his red wine. That's not what I meant. It's just nice to see you interested in someone. Fuck you and dunce face. I'm not, dude. You've been having a staring contest with him for a solid hour. Your fucking point? The red-haired alpha gave him an amused look before staring intently at his empty wine glass. It's your agency's anniversary, cats. All these people are here to celebrate your accomplishments, but you only have eyes for Midoriya. Two things about that statement made Katsuki much more irritated than before. Katsuki clenched his jaw, his eyes flickering to the empty balcony again. I didn't ask for this party. Round face just likes to watch me suffer. Eijiro chuckled as a toothy grin tugged at his lips. Ocha wants you to be happy, bro. Why do you think she arranged for the party to be up here? Because she's a nosy little shit. Before Eijiro could respond, Katsuki noticed a tiny bit of movement on that damn balcony. Frodo, who had disappeared with Izuku, climbed his ridiculously extravagant cat tree. His tail puffed out slightly as he stared inside. Then came Izuku, who looked frazzled and nervous as he exited his apartment. He looks really fucking anxious. Why? The answer, as you might expect, was not something Katsuki ever considered himself ready for. A short woman clung to Izuku's side, obviously fussing over him in a way a mother usually would. Plus, they were damn near identical. After the woman finally sat down, Izuku turned and walked inside again. When Izuku appeared again, he had a cane in one hand and a frail old man in the other. However, Katsuki quickly recognized the old man from his years at UA. It's hard to forget the face of the man who saved his emotionally stunted ass from the love. No fucking way. Katsuki huffed loudly, earning a confused glance from Eijiro. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? All Might was laughing and ruffling Izuku's curls like it was something he did all the time. Hell, he looked a lot better than he did a few years ago. He still looked weak, but his eyes were brighter and his smile much less forced. Katsuki faced his best friend, who still looked confused. I'll be right back. Make sure nobody follows me. Eijiro blinked, watching as Katsuki downed the rest of his scotch. Are you finally asking him on a date? If you are, can you wait till tomorrow? Denki and I have a bet? Thankfully, Katsuki didn't stick around long enough to hear the rest of that sentence. If he had, then he probably would have kicked someone's ass into next week. Instead, he moved closer towards the balcony. Look at me, damn it. Izuku seemed oblivious to Katsuki's gaze, which might have been a little irritating. The small Omega was clearly anxious and frazzled about whatever was going on, so that bothered the Alpha more than anything else. He had his questions too, of course. But right now, more than any questions he might have, Katsuki wants Izuku's pretty green eyes on him. He wants the nerd to look at him, or at least acknowledge his fucking existence. Is that too greedy? Selfish? Katsuki doesn't have long to think about it, though. Because his legs moved on their own. Boom, asterisk 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 asterisk. Izuku boom. Before Izuku had a chance to answer his mother's question, which was on his therapy, so he wasn't too keen on answering that anyway. The sound of an explosion echoed through the air. Inko let out a startled yelp, but Toshinori simply sighed. The older Alpha had a wistful expression on his face as he looked behind Izuku. Ah, nostalgia. Some things never change, I suppose. What? Izuku turned, his eyes widening as he locked eyes with an all-too-familiar blonde. Dynamite stood right there, on his fucking balcony, with faint wisps of smoke wafting from his hands. If the situation had been different, Izuku probably wouldn't have cared. Except both of his parents are here. Dynamite blinked, holding Izuku's gaze with his own. Hey, nerd. This jerk. Don't, hey nerd, me. What the hell are you doing on my balcony? The blonde Alpha's lips twitched into a slight smile. His vermilion eyes flickered to Izuku's parents. Interaction. Figured I'd come to say hi. That party is boring as hell, anyway. Izuku felt his skin flush, but he held his ground. You can't keep jumping over here, Dynamite. Use the door like a normal person. I don't think anything about this is normal, Deku. And what is that supposed to mean? Dynamite raised an eyebrow, looking even hotter than before. It's not everyday Yagi-sensei in the city. Last I heard from Icy Hot, the old man was at a special hospital in the country. Izuku stilled. Maybe once, Izuku wanted to tell other people about his dad. When he was younger, things had been different and less complicated. His dad hadn't retired yet and could still use a little of OFA. If villains came after them, Izuku and Inko would be protected. Following All Might's public retirement, villains of all shapes and sizes wanted to kill him. Izuku and Inko were placed under government identity protection shortly after the events at Kamino Ward. And now Dynamite is here. On Izuku's balcony. That's none of your concern, Dynamite. The blonde winced. Katsuki. My name is Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku barely processed the information, which he already knew, but whatever, before narrowing his eyes in suspicion. That's a bit reckless, don't you think? I'm a civilian. Dynamite no. Katsuki took a small breath at Izuku's accusatory tone. Both were aware that the Omega's parents, even Katsuki wasn't even aware that they were his parents, were watching the interaction with mild intrigue. I think being reckless is in the job description, nerd. The green-eyed Omega huffed, his skin a darker shade of red now. For some reason, hearing the nickname from Katsuki's lips sounded more affectionate than it should. Right. Do you just appear on everyone's balcony, or am I just special? It was meant to be a jab, but the pro-hero blushed. Katsuki's ears were the softest shade of pink as he answered. Bold of you to assume I tolerate everybody. You're obviously special, dumbass. This time it was Izuku's turn to flush bright red. I think that's enough, my boy. Join us, young Bakugo. It's been a long time. Toshinori didn't sound bothered by the sudden appearance of Katsuki. In fact, he sounded incredibly amused by the interaction between his son and former student. And just like that, the somewhat tense bubble between Izuku and Katsuki burst. Katsuki cleared his throat awkwardly, tearing his vermilion eyes away from Izuku's freckled skin. He bowed slightly, suddenly looking stiff and formal. Of course. We haven't spoken since I opened that damn agency. The blonde then moved closer and sat next to Izuku's parents. Why is everyone acting like this is normal? After a few seconds, Katsuki turned to Inko and bowed his head. Apologies. My name is Bakugo Katsuki. I didn't. Are you the one who saved him a month ago? Izuku snapped out of a daze and felt the blood drain from his face. Toshinori hummed, sipping his tea as his eyes flickered between Inko and Katsuki. The red-eyed alpha, however, had clenched his jaw at the mention of the attack. Before the hero could answer, Izuku cleared his throat and finally joined them. Yes, Ma. Bakugo-san handled the situation last month. Inko blinked slowly, processing the information before she looked at her husband. They had a silent conversation before she looked at Katsuki again. Carefully, she grasped the alpha's scarred hand. She looked on the verge of tears. Thank you so much. I'm not sure what we would have done if Izuku had gotten hurt again. Kill me now, please. Katsuki swallowed thickly before nodding. There's no need to thank me, Midoriya-sama. What kind of pro would I be if I didn't do my job? Please, call me Inko. Midoriya isn't my last name anymore. Inko, then. Izuku anxiously fiddled with his spooky sweater as Katsuki glanced at him. This entire situation felt awkward and uncomfortable, but not because of the hero's sudden appearance. His mother always made him feel as if he was suffocating. She means well, though. Katsuki tore his eyes away from Izuku as his alpha scent shifted from nervous to serious. He looked at Toshinori, who offered him a small grin. You're awfully fucking quiet, sensei. I didn't think that hospital would let you on outings. That's because he wasn't in a hospital. The retired hero sighed, placing his tea on the table. Still blunt as ever, young Bakugo. I figured we'd have this conversation soon enough, especially since Shota told me you requested Sakota's file. Wait a goddamn second. He did what? Everyone looked at Izuku. The small Omega, however, now felt furious as he glared at Katsuki. Is that why you checked on me the day after? You had no right to see that. Katsuki's eye twitched. Tsukachi was being shady as fuck, Deku. I wanted to figure out what the hell was up with you. You hardly know me, Dynamite. How did you even get clearance for that? Toshinori spoke up this time. I gave him clearance, Izuku. He did what? The freckled Omega felt out of his depth as all the new information rang in his ears. And why would you do something like that, Dad? You, of all fucking people, know how important my privacy is. Katsuki choked at the new info. Everyone ignored him, though. Toshinori sighed, folding his hands in his lap. Because I trust him, Izuku. He's one of the few people aware of One for All. Ah. Izuku ignored the bitter taste on his tongue as his shoulders slumped. Everything seemed to be such a chaotic mess, especially now that Dynamite knows the truth. The idea of his dad and Uncle Shota deciding things behind his back shouldn't have been surprising. He's an Omega, after all. Without a mate, Izuku is technically under the care of his parents and other members of his family. He's your fucking dad? Katsuki's incredulous tone broke the tense silence. Izuku couldn't hide his exasperated sigh this time. With a loud huff, the freckled Omega rested his chin on his hand and stared at the pro-hero head-on. Yes. Due to certain events, Dad decided it was best that the public didn't know about me and Ma. What in the ever-loving fuck? Peeved. The freckled artist chuckled bitterly under his breath before taking a sip of his tea. Bet you didn't see that coming, huh? I'm the worthless Omega son of All Might. Izuku, Toshinori started, but the Omega slammed his empty teacup on the table. Ignoring both of his parents, Izuku stood and stormed inside. His chest hurt and he felt so fucking overwhelmed by all of this. Everyone seemed to be making decisions for him, and it was so fucking infuriating. Worthless and quirkless, the ultimate combination. Izuku stopped in the kitchen as tears started to well up in his eyes. With trembling limbs, the small Omega sank to the tiled floor and pulled his knees to his chest. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why Izuku's upset. On some level, he felt betrayed by his father. Izuku had initially assumed that his interactions with Dynamite were weird moments of serendipity. Now he knows they weren't. Then there's the shame, which seems to grow heavier in Izuku's stomach with every passing second. Even though he knows that his dad loves him unconditionally, there's always that stupid insecurity that follows him wherever he goes. Izuku is the quirkless Omega son of All Might, pathetic. I'm pathetic. This place hasn't changed much since the last time I visited. There's definitely more art shit, though. Izuku stilled as that familiar raspy baritone caressed his ears. Then that comforting campfire smell reached his nose, full of caution and concern. With his tears still falling, Izuku glanced up. Katsuki stood a few steps in front of Izuku, looking down at the Omega with an unreadable look in those vermilion eyes. His parents were nowhere in sight, meaning that they were eined. Strangely, Izuku didn't feel as suffocated. Why did you follow me? The Alpha blinked as Izuku spoke, his vermilion eyes never leaving his face. Because of what you said. Why the fuck did you call yourself worthless? Izuku scowled. You call me Deku. How is that any different? That's not how I meant it. Even if I did, why the fuck would you believe me? Then how did you mean it? The small Omega sighed, using his sweater sleeves to wipe away his remaining tears. He felt gross, but Katsuki didn't seem bothered by the sight. I grew up with everyone calling me worthless, useless, or a disappointment. Kinda hard to convince me otherwise. Katsuki's lips twisted into a scowl. Izuku, however, simply continued speaking since it helped his mind focus. I'm quirkless. When I got diagnosed, everyone avoided me like I had the plague. Did you know that my very existence is bad luck? Silence hung in the air. It makes sense, honestly. I've always seemed to have the worst luck. The small Omega sighed, resting his chin on his knees. Frodo, who had followed Katsuki inside, the little cheater, started rubbing himself against Izuku's legs. Did you know that Dad chose me as a successor first? Katsuki's expression darkened. Deku, stop. Izuku cut him off, feeling tears well up again. My body couldn't handle all the power. After a few broken limbs, I got really sick. Even with a quirk, my bad luck never seemed to run out. It probably never will. The freckled Omega felt his tears fall down his cheeks, dripping all over his favorite pair of pants. The silence between Izuku and Katsuki was deafening, especially as they stared at each other. It was as if all either of them could do was study the other. Izuku shakily wiped his tears with his sweater sleeve again. I don't want anybody knowing about this, about me. My dad doesn't deserve that. You're such a fucking idiot. Huh? Katsuki sighed, taking a few steps closer before sitting down in front of Izuku. Frodo purred even louder, head-butting the Alpha's shoulder. Basing your entire existence on what other shitheads think of you is stupid. Izuku pursed his lips as his skin flushed. I don't think. Quirk or not, I think your art is fucking amazing. Oh. The compliment made Izuku's inner Omega preen, which really isn't too much of a surprise. With flushed cheeks and a flustered demeanor, the small Omega hid his face in his knees. He felt embarrassed and slightly out of breath, of all things. Izuku took a shaky breath, focusing on forming the proper words. You're just trying to make me feel better. Katsuki's eyes never left Izuku's flushed skin. I don't say shit I don't mean. I don't have any reason to lie to you, Deku. And when have I ever been known to spare the fucking feelings of others? Ah, you're too fucking hard on yourself, nerd. Izuku swallowed thickly, avoiding the alpha's gaze. Old habits die hard. Katsuki raised a single eyebrow, resting his elbows on his knees as he leaned forward. His scent washed over Izuku, making the Omega's senses heighten. I mean it, Deku. You're much more than you give yourself credit for. How do you even know that? You don't know me outside of that file. I'd like to. Izuku stilled at Katsuki's words, his viridian eyes widening. Excuse me? Katsuki released a heavy sigh, using a large hand to rub his jaw. He looked slightly embarrassed, giving his skin a slight reddish tinge. I'm not good at this shit, damn it. Words aren't exactly my strong suit. I'm still not following. The alpha fell strangely silent, making Izuku's eyebrows furrow. Katsuki looks incredibly nervous and embarrassed, which he found pretty cute. Despite the rough exterior, Katsuki is clearly the equivalent of a teddy bear. Izuku pursed his lips, suppressing a small smile. You're freaking yourself out, you know. My therapist says it's better to just speak your mind. Katsuki's lips twitched. Yeah? I can't do it either, but the idea is nice. The blonde hero chuckled under his breath, making Izuku's heart flutter. It sounded so soft and comforting in the Omega's ears. Alright, nerd. I said that I'd like to know you better, outside whatever bullshit we've been doing lately. Izuku squeaked as his skin flushed a bright red. Oh my god. He wants to talk more, to me. Oi, why the hell are you hiding your face? Izuku's face is buried in his knees again as he tried to keep his heart from leaving his body. He's been pining over this alpha for ages, after all. I didn't think that you noticed. I figured I was imagining things, honestly. Katsuki huffed, but he didn't sound annoyed. I've been staring at you for the past month and a half, Deku. How the fuck could I not notice? The flustered Omega peeked over at the alpha, still too flustered to show his face. I thought it was because of the attack. Being a hero is your job, and I'm not exactly interesting enough to be. You're wrong. You had my attention from the beginning. Oh my god. Izuku's inner Omega is basically going berserk right now, making him feel incredibly overwhelmed by this new information. Katsuki sighed loudly, finally making Izuku remove his face from its hiding spot. The alpha looked just as flustered. In fact, his skin held a fair amount of pink as he stared at the Omega. I want to know you better, nerd. You're much more interesting than my squad of idiots. Oh okay. Izuku stuttered, his voice cracking. The alpha grinned, beaming with pride at Izuku's acceptance. Good. Now, we should probably head back outside. Your mom wasn't exactly thrilled to let me check on you first. Izuku sighed, watching Katsuki get to his feet. I'm surprised she let you. Hero privileges, probably. Katsuki snickered, helping Izuku to his feet. His hands felt warm and calloused, contrasting against the Omega's colder ones. They balanced each other out, in a comforting way. Come on, nerd. I don't need your mom thinking I got bad intentions or some shit like that. What are your intentions, friends, or something more?